Hey guys, today I decided to try to fool everybody by looking professional and putting a little cardigan on here, but joke's on you, I'm wearing yoga pants. So, with that little confession for the day, we will turn to our first element of valid contracts and talk about agreement. This is probably actually going to be the first of a series of short videos. I think number one, I like the idea of kind of trying to keep videos short because it just gives you more flexibility in terms of when you'll have the time to sit down and watch them. Number two, they also upload to YouTube quite a bit more quickly. The longer they are, it's kind of like the longer it takes to upload. So to get them to you faster, we'll keep these kind of short. So we'll talk kind of in general today or here about the agreement, and then I'll probably do a separate short video on offer and then one on the rules involving acceptance. So as far as our overview goes, and this is a little bit of review from our basic elements video, we know that the agreement itself is made up of an offer and an acceptance. Now again, as I mentioned in the last video, this is another situation where the way that we use these legal terms is very specialized and it's different than how we would use these terms kind of in just everyday English. It's a much more specific definition. So you do want to watch out for that. As an example, if I said to you, hey, I'm really interested, I'd really love to buy your house or I'd really love to buy your car. We might say that I have offered to buy your house or car just kind of in everyday English, right? That's how we might explain the statement that I made. However, in legal terms, my statement would not actually be classified as an offer. That would be classified as an invitation to bid or as a way of trying to initiate negotiation, right? I might be opening that conversation. And maybe as that conversation progresses, at some point, there may be a statement that we can identify later in the conversation that we would say, okay, there it is, right? Now we have a statement that meets the qualifications and that we can classify as an offer. But my basic statement, hey, even if I say I would absolutely love to buy your house, I'm making you an offer right now. That alone, legally, is not what we would classify as an offer. And so I think this video today is going to describe a little bit more about kind of why that is and why we do get picky about it, especially when we're dealing with common law contracts. All right. So the first kind of key thing to understand about an offer is that when we classify a statement as an offer, what that means in terms of the legal effect is that when I have made an offer to you, it creates the power of acceptance in you, right? If I'm the offeror, I'm making the offer, you're the offeree. So acceptance, or I'm sorry, an offer creates the power of acceptance in the offeree. Now, if we look to acceptance and kind of our legal effect here, this helps us understand why the offer is important. So if an acceptance is effective, right, an effective acceptance creates a contract. Recall, right, now this is, of course, this is assuming we have consideration, assuming we have capacity, assuming we have legality. But if we have those other elements in place, then the moment the offer and the acceptance come together, we have formed an agreement. And at this point now, we have a contract, right? That means that we have an agreement that is legally binding, that can be enforced in a court of law. If you try to back out of that agreement, you can be liable for damages, right? There's a reason for the other party to file a lawsuit against you and get a judgment requiring you to pay damages, or potentially even certain types of equitable remedies might be available. And we'll talk about that later on. But that's a huge consequence, right? So because of that, because an effective acceptance creates that legally binding contract, it's a really big deal when we say that an offer creates the power of acceptance in the offeree, because that's a really big power. That's really, really significant. So what we want to be able to do when we're trying to classify a statement as an offer or not, we're trying to determine whether a legal offer has been made. What you want to do is basically picture the offeree just saying, yes, I accept. If it makes sense at that point, that's a good indication that you're on the right track. And we'll talk a little bit more about this when we get into the details on an offer. But if you think back to my original example where I said, hey, I would love to buy your house. If you jump up at that point and say, yes, I accept, I mean, right? Like that, there's kind of the practical question of, well, how can we sit here and say, just as a matter of common sense, that we've got any kind of a contract, right? We didn't agree on a price. We didn't agree on a time for delivery. We didn't agree on a time to close. We haven't had any conversation about any details in terms of what that sale is actually going to look like. And so that's why, right? Because when we say an offer has been made, all the offeree has to do is just say, yes, I accept, and bam, now you're bound. Now you're on the hook for this contract. We just have to get a little bit picky in making sure that our terms of the offer are specific, and there's some other things that you want to look at as well. Now, what I've got up here, and again, you'll see this come up over and over throughout the rest of our contracts coverage. There was a reading specifically on this concept. What I've got here is kind of underlying the agreement, the formation of agreement. We have what we call the objective theory of contract. And what that does is it basically says we are going to look at almost every aspect of a contract, including whether an agreement was formed. When we start talking a little bit more about contract terms and contract interpretation, we're still going to be using that objective theory of contract. But all these aspects of contract formation, they're sort of grounded in this objective theory of contract. And so what we're looking at is how a reasonable person would have viewed the question of whether a contract had been formed. Again, what that does is it offers some protection. It makes sure, well, it makes it less likely that there would be any kind of confusion over whether an offer and acceptance have been made. It doesn't avoid all confusion. We'll talk about that later, but it certainly helps. But the idea here is that we want to make sure that it's objectively reasonable to have a situation where, let's say, your offeree tries to accept. We want to make sure that it was clear, it would have been clear to a reasonable person that the offeror was intending to make an offer. So again, that's another way to kind of explain the reason why my first example could not be a legal offer. If I say to you, hey, I'd really love to buy your house, and you say, yes, I accept. Right? My reaction is going to be, you accept what? Right? Like that doesn't make any sense. That seems a little bit weird. That seems a little bit off. Well, really, honestly, that's kind of what reasonableness in the law does in almost any context, is it sort of protects my expectations kind of as a reasonable person. It wouldn't make sense to me that I would be bound or on the hook to make any kind of a purchase simply because I've expressed an interest in buying your house, right? We got to go a lot further and have a much more specific discussion before we can say, okay, yep, right, I'm bound. I have a legal obligation to purchase the house. Okay. So again, we'll see that come up kind of throughout the next few videos. We'll talk a little bit in the next video about some of our basic rules on determining whether an offer is I guess officially kind of a legal offer, and then we'll turn to the rules on acceptance.